Hi everyone, I'm Subhashish Sahu, Head of Marketing at FinFloh. Welcome to the sixth episode of Finance Leaders in Focus, a podcast where we go behind the scenes with today's top finance leaders, explore their journeys, big wins, and hard lessons, plus the strategies, tools, and trends shaping the future of finance. In today's episode, Building Resilient Finance Operations in High Volume Businesses, I'm speaking with a finance leader who has spent nearly 2 decades designing and scaling finance operations across global enterprises. Joining us today is Amit Raj Chandla, Director of Accounts Receivable at Clean Harbors. His leadership journey includes senior finance operation roles at Bev, Accenture, and Tech Mahindra, where he has led large global teams, improved time payments, automated master data processes, and unlocked over $30 million in working capital value and delivered a lot of other measurable impact across the entire order to cash and procure to pay spectrum. In this episode, we're going to talk about how to improve cash flows, manage AR in fast moving businesses, build strong finance teams, and use automation and AI effectively. Let's get into it. Welcome, Amit. How have you been?
Thank you. Thank you for the great introduction. I'm honored to be here.
Sure, Amit. Okay, so we'll just begin. So, Amit, like before we actually get into the crux of the conversation, right? We'd love to know a little bit about you. We'll just start from the beginning. Like, what drew you into the world of finance, and how did your journey through order to cash and procure to pay evolve over the years? Just a quick brief over
Absolutely great. Thanks.
there.
So, just to start off, fresh out of
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
college, I was always interested in finance and accounting. And, I wanted to
Okay.
start my career in either finance directly or finance operations processes. And fortunately, I landed into the order to cash process because this
Mm-hmm.
is where I actually understood the business. I understood how cash flow works, how different aspects of communication with the customers works, how to improve
Mm-hmm.
customer experience while reading and analyzing data and patterns.
Correct.
So that's where my journey started. I got fortunate enough. I started off in the collections process for one of the businesses, took the jump and moved on to order management. Again, got an opportunity to manage end-to-end account receivables manager in the next organization. So I was responsible for collections, cash apps, billing, all infused into one particular role. And this role was also responsible to do financial reporting. And
Okay.
that's where most of my learning happened. This is again, while I had always been interested into collections, the only
Mhm.
area where I felt I was not comfortable was during the interactions with customers, making those
Understood.
calls, right?
I
But
get that. Yeah.
once you kind of step into these particular roles and once you become comfortable, this is one aspect of my job that I started to love, talking to the customers, talking to different stakeholders, whether it's internal or external, understanding their
Correct.
concerns, and then working to resolve all those concerns by working with different departments, collaborating with different departments, using
Yeah.
data to share the positions or manage those concerns. This is where I kind of continue to upskill and grow in the organization.
Got it.
Once I learned order to cash, once you understand where the money is coming from,
Hmm?
ultimately you also kind of become curious on where the money is getting spent.
Correct.
And just by a happy incident, I got into the process of P2P. I also
Mm-hmm.
have experience into telecom industry. And because of my experience, I got selected to lead a team which was into accounts payable. And that's where I started to learn the processes from vendor creations to, invoice payments, invoice reconciliations. So it
Correct.
has
Yeah.
been a very, very good journey, managing end to end business
Yeah.
from collecting the money to actually paying the vendors and understanding where we are spending those.
Yeah, I think that's been an amazing journey, Amit. Glad to hear about it. And I think I'd like to kind of focus on the point that you mentioned, where you said that you initially didn't want to get into a position where you're talking to customers, but eventually you started to love that. And I would kind of resonate that fact because I've been speaking to a lot of finance leaders, and majority of them kind of come across as people who would love to understand the dynamics of other teams because finance as a function does the best job when they are able to understand the business outcomes, and
Right.
that is when they are able to create maximum impact onto the business side of things, right? And it's
Absolutely.
just not about numbers nowadays. It's also about creating that value, being able to articulate what you are trying to speak via those numbers to the business teams so that they see the value and then they are able to take the proper decisions, right? So amazing work there. But I'm just a little curious because a lot of times what I've seen is that finance leaders mostly pick one stream. Like you said, you began with order to cash and they just try to stick to that, right?
Yeah.
But in your case, you have seen both the sides, right? You've seen the collection side of things and you've also seen the payable side of things, right?
Yeah.
So do you think working across both the functions has kind of helped you see the gaps better, and thus you have been able to navigate your processes better?
Yeah, very good question. So I would agree, and in fact, I will also say, which you don't find so relevantly mentioned in my profile, is I've also seen the third side, which is R2R or E2R or report
Oh,
to report,
that's
right?
amazing.
I've,
Okay.
I've also
So
managed
we've seen
it.
the entire spectrum of the office of the CFO, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, correct. So from that aspect, I believe, this has helped me to become not just a domain expert. And when I say domain expert, into finance, not just
Yep.
one domain like O2C or AP, but into
Mm-hmm.
finance. It has also helped me evolve my thought process. The shift in the mindset is what I have actually gained to understand what are the insights that are coming in from both the aspects. What are the customer
Correct.
behaviors we are looking at. I
Yeah.
no longer look at piecemeal solutions. I am somebody who actually also talk to the teams and say, how do we provide end-to-end solutions?
Correct.
If there is a
Yep.
relationship between customers and vendors, how do we build that, and how would that help the organization improve its cash flow, improve its working capital optimization, or even
Yep.
credibility as such? So
Right.
those things is something that I have been able to learn, during my tenure of managing the end-to-end, businesses.
Yeah. Very well put together. We'll just kind of move on from that. That's obviously been an amazing journey, and it's a pleasure that I've been able to learn, and it's a pleasure that our audience would be able to kind of witness the kind of learnings that you've had across the episode, right? But we'll move on to the second question now. For you to build a high performing finance team across some of the most complex finance functions that you've worked at, like what have been your core principles or philosophies that have guided your leadership style? Because when you start talking about people in finance, these are people who are very number specific, goal driven, and who would always want to stay on top of their targets and just be particular to the points that they are working upon, right? So
Yeah.
to handle people of this sort, what has been your philosophy exactly?
Yeah. So you're right. When we talk about
Mm,
finance professionals, right, while they have the knowledge, coming into the organizations, either they are
mm,
freshers or they're coming up with experiences, you need to
yep,
manage them also differently, but at the same time, giving them goals and visions on how do they sail through the daily workflows, not
yep,
just looking at the end, what's going to happen during month end, peak rush hours. That's not the only objective. And what has helped me is the three principles that I've tried to follow. So I'm going to talk about those three. The
definitely.
first one is, my style or my leadership is mostly about empowering my people with accountability. I want
Right.
to tell them that, I'm going to support you in all the decisions that you're going to take, but also
Mm-hmm.
ensure that whatever you're doing, you're going to be accountable for the same thing.
Right.
We're going to support you guys, but first understand what we are doing and why we are doing something. So
Yep.
that's very important. And for them to have the freedom to take decision is what I always kind of give them the liberty about. And that's what I
Got it.
coach all my leaders, all my people on the ground also. The
Amazing.
second
Okay.
thing I would talk about, communication. And when I talk
Mm-hmm.
about communication, it comes around that there needs to be a clarity. And when you
Yep.
talk about businesses and when you
Mm-hmm.
talk to different business stakeholders, whether again internal or external, that communication should also display or have an element of empathy in it. A lot of times, the customers on the other end or our stakeholders in their own particular job would be struggling with one or the other situations, and if you
Mm-hmm.
don't display that clarity and the empathy, both segments, then you're not kind of helping yourself to ask the right questions and get the
Right.
right relationship built, because this is not going to be just one time effort. This is going to be a long lasting effort.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Right. And third is adaptability. This is why I say adaptability. As you mentioned, 20 years of experience. what I have observed is that we have evolved. We have done so much of improvement into our processes, bring in new concepts, have new technologies supporting us and helping us, right? And
Yep.
transformation and technology is to stay, right? And this
Correct.
movement needs to be more linear in nature, and adaptability is what I think is going to play a very, very important role. And this is one
Okay.
of the most foremost principle that I want to kind of now at this point cater to all my leaders here in the organization, because if they are not adaptable to new technologies, new ideas, then we are
Yeah.
still going to work on the legacy way, and I don't think that's the way forward.
Yeah, I think you just thinking like every other modern finance leaders in the world right now, and people who are at the top, people who have been running very successful companies, have a very similar kind of a thought process. They have understood that technology is the enabler that is going to take their people, their processes into the next level, and that is what will help them to be like best in class in what they are doing, right? So very well put together. And I'd just like to touch upon on the second point that you mentioned, right, which
Right.
is about communication. And again, kind of going back to the point that I mentioned earlier, that a lot of times, I think if you look at how finance teams worked as a function previously, probably a decade ago, was they just used to focus on creating perfect spreadsheets that would have all the numbers and data in place, right? That was kind of their entire job. And there was
Yes.
probably some other people whose job was to kind of figure out an insight out of those numbers and then take business decisions. But how it has moved ahead from there is that finance team has kind of become the enabler of these insights, and they have kind of become the best communicators of the data that they have prepared, right? Because this is data that has been prepared by them, so there would be no other person better than them who could kind of amplify on the insight that has to be put forward, right? So what are your thoughts on that? How have you seen your team like taking up these kind of challenges?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I
Hmm.
absolutely agree with what you just mentioned. You're absolutely right. When we
Yeah.
started off into this culture of GCCs, or even when
Yeah.
we look at BPOs,
Right.
everybody was looking at that one sole piece and saying, this is my responsibility, and I'm going to just work on this. This is
Exactly.
where
Yeah.
I believe the biggest change has come in, not just
Hmm.
in GCCs, but across the organizations now. Everybody
Right.
wants to look at, how do we resolve a business problem, which is not just in one department, but whether it's upstream or downstream.
Okay.
And
Hmm.
that's where I think one of the aspects which I want to kind of, I'm very, very inclined and I push for, that is how do we use technology and analytics to bring in that streamlining. A
Right.
lot of the
Right.
times, if the processes are simple, well defined, if the metrics are pretty clear, right, they are well
Hmm.
managed processes, and you don't want to put a lot of effort into doing something.
Correct.
However, if your
Correct.
process is manually driven,
Hmm.
inconsistent inputs, inconsistent outputs, that's where you want to go out and ask for help, whether it's a
Correct.
technology help, whether it's a process improvement help, which is called operation excellence. But you need to
Hmm.
ask. As leaders of today, one of the things that I always do, and I do it myself, is I'm not afraid to ask for help. And that's what I want to kind of tell everybody, that
Yeah.
you cannot drive end-to-end progressions or transformations alone. Seek.
Yeah.
While you seek and go out and look for technologies, also look to build capabilities in the team who have this
Yep.
end-to-end vision built up to help
Yep.
and move you from those inconsistent spreadsheets, just like you mentioned, or move out
Yeah.
those legacy systems. And that's where the value to the business will come in.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I think asking for help could be the biggest strength if you're able to do it in the right way. So, yeah, very well said on that point. But yeah, I think you being a people leader, another question that's kind of coming to my mind is that you definitely have two goals. You have to keep your people happy, and you also have to make them accountable for the performance that they have, right? But these
Right.
are like contradictory statements. Like there would be times where probably the performance of of particular employees would not be up to the mark, right? So how do you like create a balance between these two approaches? Like what's your thought?
I would agree to disagree when you say it's a
Hmm.
contradictory statement. I think both of
Okay.
them needs to go hand in hand, right?
Okay.
In
Perfect.
today's environment, we have always said people are our biggest asset, right? Without people, most of these processes would not run. That's something that we need to accept.
Absolutely.
Whether it's
Hmm.
AI that's coming in, whether we talk about generative AI, whether we would talk about new digitization platforms that are coming in, whether we talk about chat GPT or anything like that, people are
Yep.
still at the root of what we do.
Correct. Correct.
Keeping them happy, it's a
Yes.
separate topic, but I don't think so the job is only to keep them happy. The job is to
Mm-hmm.
keep them interested and help them just learn from the job. That will, that will give them a motivation to stay with us for a longer period. We don't
Mm-hmm.
look at people just for today. We don't want to look at people just, okay, just give them a tool which would help them today in my organization or in my process, right? We want to
Right.
help them and support them in building a career.
Right.
And that's how
Right.
we kind of, you can say happy, you can say satisfied, or you can say motivated, but that's how all
Yep.
leaders should look at people. People are the one who are going to take it to from where we are standing today to the next goal, to the next improvement. But for them to take that first step, you
Mm.
have to push them in the right direction, give them the tools. And when I say give them the tools, help them learn and upskill into that relevant roles, and
Yep.
help them in their journey, or in their career. And do
Yep.
not just look at those smaller benefits. Look at that
Mm.
end to end goal, which would help you for a longer period. Build people in the organization who are going to last with you and help you deliver, the results for a very, very long time.
Okay, I think that's a lovely way of looking at this question. It's like very well said. I would frankly say that. And like just touching upon on your point, right? When you said people are the asset of any
Yeah,
company that has to grow, right?
yeah,
And I would agree. Although I work for a company which promotes AI, right? But what we have also seen is that ultimately AI can probably eliminate a lot of manual tasks, but it when it comes to critical decision making, it is still the humans who have to be in the loop for the AI to function properly, right?
right.
So that is one thing that has to be imbibed, and I'm sure that the way you have been handling your team, this would have already been imbibed into the culture of your current company. And that if people are able to understand that AI is here just to help them become more efficient, but the final decision making still stays with them, I think
Right.
that is when they'll be able to accept AI as a technology and start treating it as a co-pilot and not as someone who could just replace them at any given point of time, right? Because
Right.
that can never happen anytime soon.
Right.
Okay, perfect. Then I think we'll move on from this question and we'll kind of now talk a little bit about your personal experiences. You've spent a lot of time at multiple global organizations like Ebenbev, Accenture, Tech Mahindra, Genpact, right? And now
Right.
obviously at Clean Harbors for quite some time. So we'd love to understand if there have been any initiatives or any project that you're very proud of because you thought that this is something that you did that created a huge impact, because I've gone
Yeah.
through a LinkedIn profile and it does talk about a lot of initiatives. So I just thought that we can just bring one of them here for our audience to kind of see and understand how you were able to drive that entire
Yeah. Again, good question, but picking one would be very difficult for me, in this journey.
project.
I'm gonna
While I would love to like kind of talk about all the projects that you have done, it is just because that we have a limited amount of time and a limited like time span in which our audience listen to us. So yeah, we would love kind of like stick to your top ones.
Yeah, yeah. So let me talk
Yes.
about couple of them, and I'm going to why I say
Sure.
couple is because both of them, while innovative or new ways of doing things, are a little different. The
Yeah.
first one, again, which personally I'm very proud about, is introducing analytics into the process. So, as
Okay.
part of our collections and cash flow stabilization processes, what we did was introduce predictive analytics into the whole collection process. So, I worked
Correct.
along with our analytics team, and build a model which can not just predict when to expect payment or when the disputes would be happening. It can also predict customer behaviors and patterns. And
Oh,
that
that's
really
amazing.
helped because that's what you wanted to do. You want to give your collection teams the full tools and empower them in such a manner where they can already look at the data and identify, okay, there's going to be a dispute. How can I kind of go ahead and help them proactively to resolve something? And
Okay.
in case where you feel, I am going to receive money, I'm going to receive cash without any issues, how can I
Mm-hmm.
not spend a lot of time there? Traditionally, how it happens in collections is there are multiple spreadsheets and people look at those
Right.
spreadsheets, look at those
Yeah,
history
yeah,
and
yeah.
notes and identify.
Correct.
But
Which
this
takes a lot
tool,
of time, right? Yeah.
yeah, it's a lot of manual effort. But this tool
Mm-hmm.
kind of helped us to build a way where we have to just focus on certain accounts and identify, okay, what is the expected behavior of the customer. If there is going to be an
Okay.
issue, how can I proactively research the issue and take it to the next resolution? So that's something that
Okay.
I was really
Interesting.
proud of. So analytics definitely very close to my heart because I have done other projects there, and I definitely feel there is value where all businesses should now invest
Yep.
in. The second is
So, Amit, like
digitization.
before you move on to the second point, right? I just have a follow-up question
Yeah,
to the first project that you mentioned. You said that you have been able to build an analytics tool that is able to predict buyer behavior, that is able to predict disputes that are going to happen. So,
correct.
is it based on their past payment history or their terms that are there or the average days of delay? So, are these certain metrics that you have taken into account? So, if you could just help us understand a little bit about the metrics that you
Yeah,
take.
no, you rightly said it. It looks at the
Mhm.
past payment data. A lot of
Okay.
this comes in from their payment patterns, their payment behaviors. A lot of input comes in from their net terms. A lot of it also comes in from different processes. If there have been certain orders, certain disputes in the past that have been highlighted, whether it's a pricing dispute, for example, for a
Got
particular
it.
customer, then it can throw out and say, okay, hey, this customer had pricing disputes in the past. Can we look at their prices already and understand whether they have been fixed or not, whether you want to raise a credit or cancel those invoices? So that's where it is
Perfect,
the base
perfect.
of
Yeah.
the payment.
It's great that you've been able to build this up because we have been talking to a lot of companies and all of them are still doing it on spreadsheets, which kind of takes, as you said, like a lot of manual effort. And we also have been building this product for quite some time now, and we've seen very good success and very good adoption. But because you've built it yourself, great that people would now be able to understand the value of why they need a solution like this into their existing processes. Yeah,
Great.
sure.
And
Yeah.
and just I think I'm going to take 30 more seconds. I think the second project where I worked in or a partner
Mm-hmm.
was the digitization of end-to-end customer master data. This is again a
Okay.
big achievement. Again, traditionally customer master data is somebody goes into the system, fills a form, fills either is Salesforce, any other
Mm-hmm.
tool they have, or sometimes in a lot of organizations still manual in nature, right? And they will
Correct,
send it
correct.
to a department, they will validate and then kind of process in the system. This usually is very time consuming and a lot of manual effort needs to go from different people. This
Okay.
was another.
Talking about the customer onboarding journey, is it?
Correct. Customer
Okay.
onboarding journey, right? So new customer
Understood.
creations is what we were able to digitize. And when I say
Perfect.
digitize, we created a tool. Our IT team was able to create a tool which gave the sales team the opportunity to fill the form, fill the information,
Mm-hmm.
attach the documents in that app, and that app could be run through your own mobile phone. You do not even need separate handhelds for that, and that will get
Okay.
integrated directly with the system, the ERP, and the whole
Okay.
process was cut down to just 4 minutes after validation and everything. So that was a
Amazing.
great,
Amazing.
great, amazing problem solver for us.
Yeah. I think those are like really good projects because these are kind of almost the kind of solutions that people are looking for right now. You have solved the problems already because here at FinFlow, we have also been trying to solve this for a lot of other companies who have not been able to build it themselves, right?
Right.
And the fact that you said, right, that the entire onboarding process is now just 4 minutes. Uh, I would kind of resonate with that fact because we also have a functionality where we have gone ahead and created a native integration between the CRM and the ERP of the company. So it kind of happens like whenever like there is an opportunity that gets created on the CRM, so
Very nice.
FinFlow gets to know about it,
Right.
and then we are able to recommend the right payment terms, the right pricing, and the right contract terms, so that the salespeople now do not have to rely on multiple iterations of workflows of kind of getting those approvals from other teams and
Yeah.
then taking the decision, right? So
Absolutely.
yeah, so that has really been a great game changer for us, and I'm sure with your current processes, as you said, right? So I what I know of is that customer onboarding probably which takes anywhere around a week from the time they submit the documentation to validating those documents to actually getting them onboarded can now be done in minutes if you have the right solution in place. So
Absolutely.
yeah, okay, great. I think these two projects are going to be great learnings for the audience today who are listening to this episode.
Right.
If you have questions regarding this, you can definitely reach out to me, or you can definitely reach out to Amit. He would definitely be willing to help, as I know of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So we'll move on to the next question. We have kind of touched upon this while we had your introduction and in the second question, right? But kind of we'll just dig deeper into it. Like obviously you have spent 20 years into the finance function, right? You
Yeah.
probably would have joined in when spreadsheet was everything to then moving into traditional ERPs to now an age where everything is becoming automated, AI and AI agents are coming into the picture, right? So, from your first-hand experience, how do you think analytics and automation have shaped modern finance? And how do you decide that this process needs transformation versus just better execution of the current process that is there, right? So how would you go about making that decision? But we'll begin with your like views on how this entire thing has evolved over the
No,
years.
I think both are great questions. And again, as you
Hmm.
said, let's break it down into two portions, right?
Yes.
I would tell you that there has been a shift in the mindset, right? All leaders
Correct.
are now slowly evolving and accepting that AI is
Hmm.
going to be there for a very long time. There has definitely
Absolutely.
a shift in the CFO office to accept these technologies, help their
Hmm.
leaders, and encourage them to go and leverage the opportunities. And this is
Hmm.
where I think all these models that we talk about are coming in, cash flow forecasting models, predictive analytics models,
Correct.
helping dispute resolutions, automatic tagging of collection strategies or priorities. All of this is happening
Yep.
because of this acceptance in the industry. So the technology is
Correct.
going to be there, and we have to make the right use of it and understand how it would help us to look at those customer patterns, improve our customer engagement and experience. And that's something I think we are all encouraging. We are already looking at different aspects of the technology and analytics both together and say, okay, what is going to stay here and what is going to help us today versus
Hmm.
what's something that can wait for other period till the time our processes maturity level improves. Okay.
Right.
And
Right.
that's where your second question, which I would like to answer now, is when I do this study and I kind of look at solutions, my first inclination is not to go all in and say let's do automation. And again,
Yep.
what we
I get
look
that.
at is I'm looking at three things primarily when I'm kind of deciding what's the route we have to take. The
Yep.
first one, as I mentioned earlier, is process maturity. How mature is my process? The second one
Hmm.
is I'm looking at the tools and the data quality. What
Okay.
kind of ERPs are we using? Are we using modern day ERPs? Are we using legacy systems? And how's the data output and input that we are getting out of those processes?
Yep. Hmm.
And the third one, which also plays an important role, is the team capability.
Correct.
I
Okay.
talk about it a lot, is around team capabilities. The processes today, you have to understand,
Hmm.
if they're running very smoothly, if there are no concerns or issues, and you feel do not require a lot of manual interventions, I would not immediately touch them and say, let's automate everything.
Hmm.
I will look at the requirement, and I will look at the requirement in a way saying
Yeah.
this is an
Absolutely.
inconsistent process. The outputs have been not that great. Do we need to refine the KPIs? Will that help,
Yep.
this process first? And then look at the whole ERP and the data quality,
Okay.
because that will determine how much progress are we going to do by
Okay.
implementing a new technology into that process. So we have to weigh our
Okay.
options at that particular moment to decide whether an operation excellence initiative needs to be started or whether you need to kind of do a transformation initiatives.
Hmm.
While both can go hand in hand, which would be the ideal situation for any process and any business. However, if you are unclear on
Hmm.
the gaps in the process, then my advice always to the people is let's fix it via operation excellence first and then look at transformations second. See, AI is going to be there, the
Oh, okay.
hype
That's
is no
perfect.
longer
Yep.
there. We're
Hmm.
going to accept it. But it also
Yeah.
depends on the leaders who are going to accept it,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
can they turn it around and make credible uses of those AI or the technology is something that we have to look forward or see.
That's perfect. I think there are like two follow-up questions that have just come onto my mind. You mentioned about ERPs and data quality, right? Obviously, all the current ERPs that exist, like majority of them have existed for almost decades, right? So the kind of functionalities that you
Yeah.
can derive out of an ERP again becomes limited. But even if you'd want to go ahead and make a decision of shifting an ERP and
Correct.
moving on to the next, that's again a very costly affair, right? So in these junctures where you are not perfectly fine with your current ERP, or you're looking to make a decision of moving on to a better ERP, like how do you approach these situations? Like, do you look for other third party solutions who could actually come in and help and who could work on top of an ERP and kind of make the current ERP more powerful, or would you actually take the effort of going ahead and
Very, very interesting
actually switching to
question.
it?
And this is a battle I think all
Mhm.
leaders, including CFO, CEOs fight or
Exactly,
dwell into
exactly,
every day. A lot
exactly.
of the organizations, while moved into ERPs which have been there for 3 decades or 4 decades, right? but there are still a lot of organizations and a lot of businesses
Correct.
processes where they're still using legacy systems, right?
Yep.
Fortunately
Yep.
for us,
Mm.
while I say there is a shift in the mindset and everybody accepts the need to move into the new technology, a lot of new technology has evolved
Mm.
for us to put an ERP on top of our legacy systems and give us the output that we are looking forward to. Are we going to be dependent on those legacy
Understood.
systems
Understood.
and work on two different systems? Maybe not for very long, but this decision is cost based. Every organization again
Yep.
has to do that judgment or take that decision whether when's the right time to completely move on to a new ERP or when to bring an additional support into these third party ERPs and say, you can help even in the new
Correct.
ERPs like SAP, Oracle, right?
Yep.
The third parties like HighRadius, like Celonis, they have done some excellent work into technology
Mm.
spaces. And you can bring those technologies, make them sit on top of your
Correct.
systems or current ERPs and say, give me this insight. These business insights is what I
Yep.
believe
Yep.
is going to make the life of our leaders very easy because they're going to get those insights which they do not know today.
Mm-hmm.
And while the
Okay.
ERPs would continue to do the work, continue to support your backends and provide you those spreadsheets and those datas, these ERPs are capable enough to give you a summarized version and throw an insight to you. Whether it's really telling me what needs to be done and
Correct.
why there is
Correct.
a discrepancy in the data today, that generative AI needs to be a separate discussion. But I feel it's a cost based decision
Yep.
ultimately, and looking at the data they need to decide whether they want to go out into the route of getting and replacing the ERP or getting something on top of it. One last point, I would also say a lot of
Okay.
organizations that I've worked with,
Mm-hmm.
I've also seen them building their own IT departments to say, okay, we can build an ERP and replace it with something additional. We
Right.
don't need to go out the third party. That could be an additional,
Correct.
incentives
Yep.
for the CFOs or CEOs to make that call.
I think that's very well put together. And I think you are definitely guiding today's finance leaders who are struggling with making this decision into the right path, right? And obviously, you talked about names like HighRadius and Celonis. I would
Absolutely.
love to add FinFloh as
Yeah.
another player who also kind of does the same. Yeah. And we have also been seeing great results in terms of working on top of ERPs and then enabling these decisions for the leaders, right? But as you said, there are like two sides of the board. There are companies who would want to use these third party solutions,
Correct.
and there are companies who would want to build it themselves, right? Because you have built and you have been in teams who have built solutions themselves, right?
Yeah.
I'll just tell you my point of view. What I've seen is that oftentimes building your own solution kind of takes a higher amount of time, and it needs the expertise for you to be able to derive at a solution which you actually need versus you
I
going
agree.
ahead and
Yeah.
making a purchase
No, and
decision.
again,
Yeah,
it falls
how do
back
you?
onto the point around team capabilities. Is your IT team and data quality is
Hmm.
so solid that you can replicate and build a new technology and build
Absolutely.
that tool? That's something is a decision when you look at the end-to-end picture and
Yep.
identify, what's the route you have to take. Again, it's not an easy decision for
Yep.
anybody to take and say, I want to take this route. Everybody ultimately all of this comes into these three
Yep.
aspects. One is cost. Everybody looks at budget and say,
Hmm. Yeah.
this makes sense for us to invest money into a third party, and let's go out. The
Yes.
same way the person says, if we have the team capability, if we have the right data quality, let's build it internally because we are
Hmm.
going to do this probably at a 70% cost than what we are going to spend getting somebody from outside. And those are the decisions, which everybody looks at it,
Yep.
decides on the path. And then, of course, we do
Hmm.
these demo sessions with everybody to understand what are the capabilities that these third parties can give us, can deliver for us, that we are still not able to do it.
Yep.
Replicating a current ERP as it is would be an
Hmm.
easy call. However, these third parties or new ERPs are coming up with
Yep.
so many additional functionalities that are ready-made solutions for us. And those are something, which
Yeah.
goes
Definitely. Yeah.
in their favor. But again, these are the aspects when a decision needs
Yeah.
to be made.
Yeah, you kind of gave away like a evaluation checklist of
Yeah.
how to decide when you're at the juncture of build versus buy. Yeah. But definitely all the points that you said make complete sense, and those are like fair evaluators of how you would want to take a decision when you are at this juncture, right? But kind of moving on from the build versus buy and the kind how technology has shaped over time to the current age. Right now, every department is talking about AI, and finance is kind of leading it in this space. So finance leaders have understood
Yeah.
the value that AI can bring into their function, right? So in this era, like from your perspective, if we have to just key into the expertise that you have, which is into the order to cash spectrum, what do you think are certain use cases or technologies or approaches that are kind of really making a big difference? And do you think like AI has already been accepted by the office of the CEO? I know you have been like telling this fact for quite some time during this entire conversation that everyone has started to accept, and if you have to grow you should be able to accept it and grow with it. But do you think really it has been accepted to an extent that people started using it,
Very,
or
very good
what's your point?
question. Uh, See, it's my personal opinion, and
Mm-hmm.
what excites me today is how finance as a function is moving towards technology. How we are not just talking about automation. Even in this conversation, we are not limiting ourselves to just a
Correct.
piecemeal and saying this is the automation. We are moving
Yeah,
ahead
yeah,
and saying,
definitely.
how these technologies
Hmm.
can bring in intelligence for us. We do not want systems to just take over the jobs. That's not the intent. The intent is that we want
Yep.
technology to work with
Yes.
us and for us, to be very honest. That's how we should look at it. And that's where I feel,
Mm-hmm.
again,
Yeah.
the shift is very, very clear in all finance divisions, all functions. The CFO office has accepted that it's going to be there, and they have to accept it whether today or whether tomorrow. That's something that they have to do. Look, when we talk about AI, look at the
Correct.
AI from the perspective of all the predictive analysis that we are doing in the customer patterns that people are reading through, and not just in one department. They are sending those patterns into different departments to say, how can this pattern help my sales to be better when they are on the field? And those we are just now,
Mm-hmm.
I think we are
Okay.
probably moving on from a second gear to probably jumping to the fourth gear. That's how I would like to put it, right? So why that is coming in, another aspects
Okay.
which really, really excites me is the embedded dashboards. When we talk about finance, these is something that I feel are going to be the real game changers also for the organizations. uh, Give us the real time data, throw us the
Got it.
patterns, talk to us where is the next opportunity or the problem that's going to come in from. That's what we want as the real time dashboards and the live dashboards to
Mm-hmm.
tell us. We're looking at, for example, in one of the conversations we were trying to build a dashboard which tells us a real time movement of a PO funding, whether that PO has been consumed or not. I
Okay.
would not say that
Interesting.
it has been, completely developed or this thought
Interesting.
process is easy to develop. But look at the thought process that is coming from the team capabilities and saying, yes, this makes sense. This is what we are looking for. So all those things are there. In addition to that, I think, we talk about generative AI, right? We touched upon it. It's not something that has been uh,
Mm-hmm.
accepted everywhere at this point of time, or we have a ready-made solutions. But people really want to implement it because all leaders want to ask this question, not to a person, to a technology, and say, why is there a dip in my cash? Why is my DSO going high, right? And
Correct.
that's
Correct.
something they look at the data and say,
Yeah.
this is the way reason I can identify it, and not run after somebody to say, can you provide me this analysis, can you do this research? Instead, we want to implement the data
Hmm.
through this.
Absolutely. I resonate.
Again,
I resonate.
it's a very exciting time for all of
Correct.
us to say, technology is going to be here, we are all going to learn through it, and we are going to all use it as an opportunity to improve our businesses. But this will also mean a change in
Yes.
the thought
Yes.
process for our leaders. How easily are they able to accept all these
Yes.
technologies, learn themselves, recommend these technologies for their businesses, and implement them and execute them? That is the change I think we are all looking forward to, and we are hoping that this comes soon.
Amazing answer, Amit. I'm sure all the finance leaders out there who are trying to bring about a change are thinking about AI as one of the key pillars of their finance budgets, and they are able to derive value out of it. So that's the entire thing. And even this podcast that we are doing today, it's mostly to kind of bring that awareness in the existing finance leaders, that there are people who are like benefiting a lot by using the latest technologies like AI, which could be, as you said,
Yep.
right, agent tech. If you would just want to dig a little bit deeper into that, now today's CFO or today's VP of finance probably doesn't have to like create a request for an analyst to work upon, crunch numbers, and then
Absolutely.
derive at an insight or an output, right? They can just ask a question and get to the answer. And then if we kind of touch back into the manual processes that were there, so one of the key processes that we have seen that has fairly been automated by
Yeah.
the likes of AI is cash applications, right? Previously, I think it was just a manual analyst scanning through emails, scanning through remittance files to figure out what is the invoice
Yep.
that I
Yep.
need this payment to be mapped to, right? But probably still it's not at 100%. AI obviously with certain limitations, but if five analysts could do a particular amount of job in, let's say, 10 days, now they would probably be able to do it in 2 days, because 80% of what they were doing previously can now be done by AI. So there's so many interesting applications that are coming out. It is just for finance leaders to find the right use case for the business and then go about it. But yeah, it's been amazing, Amit, talking to you. And I'm sure everyone who would be listening to this podcast would gain a lot out of this episode. And yeah, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for
Everyone who's
having
been
me.
tuning
I
in
think
so far,
again it was great
have a great
interacting
day
with you.
ahead.
Thank you.
It's the same.
Thank
It's the
you.
same, yeah.